And hello, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name is Steve Bankhurst, and today's special guest comes from the University of Utah. Coach Beth, thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your coaching journey. If you wouldn't mind, just give us an overview of how you got into coaching and what you've been doing throughout your coaching career.
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here. I played at a NAIA school, Aquinas College. I actually played volleyball and softball there. I was just going to play softball, but the volleyball coach, learned that I played, so I played. Back in the day, you could do that, and got a business and economics degree actually, and really thought I was going to, go work on the stock market or something like that. And it became apparent. I started coaching a JV team during college, also a volleyball team. And it became really apparent to me fast that coaching was a passion of mine and was going to be a calling. And sure enough, I landed at some just great jobs along the way, but I put myself in position for those. Started off at a Division II program, Ferris State up in Michigan. And we were fortunate to go to the NCAA Division II Final Four. And so had success there as an assistant, got the assistant job at University of Illinois after that. And again, had the good fortune of going to the Division I Final Four in '89. So that was a great experience. And then the University of Utah was looking for a new coach. They had won one match the year before I got here. And they were looking for a young, dumb coach that was ready to take over this program. But it was just the perfect first coaching job for me. The administration and I built this together. And of course, that was 30 years ago. And I've gone through, 3 different conferences and some different building scenarios. But the administration was right there with me from the beginning. And, we started off in the WAC and went to the Mountain West. And now, of course, we're in the Pac-12. That's how I've got here. And we've had some success as of late and learned a few things along the way, and happy to discuss some of that with you today.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I'm excited because you come not only for a sport where maybe there isn't as much visibility as, a football, basketball program, but also having been established for so many years at the same place, which tends to be maybe more unusual in today's environment where coaches are jumping and moving here and there. I want to go back, though. A lot of times there's the assumption that in order to be a great coach, you have to have had a successful athletic career. And you're an example of somebody who, forgive me for saying NAIA, but, you weren't in the Olympics. You weren't number one in the country. Did you, or have you ever had those challenges, especially early in your career, where it's kind of well, who are you to tell me what to do?
100%. And when I got to Utah, I had to sell myself. That was the number one thing I knew I had to do, because we didn't have, the program couldn't sell itself. And so I had to sell, who I was and what my vision was for the program. But in fact, there was a coach who was an Olympian in our conference back in the day. And we started talking early on, and I, gave her my background, and she looked at me and said, "Wow, you're a little out of your element, aren't you?" Something to that effect. And I just remember thinking, I was going to beat her. And it was a really motivating thing for me, because I felt like I had great coaches at the NAIA level that mentored me. Like some of them are in my new book that, they were amazing mentors. So whatever level you play at, I don't think matters. I think it's the mentorship that you get. It doesn't matter what kind of player you are. It really truly is about your coaching, drive and background that matters a lot.
And I think there's an argument too that maybe professional athletes or successful athletes have learned skills that they don't necessarily know how to pass on to others. They just know how to do it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that idea of what is a coach? Can you actually teach those skills?
Yeah.
Is that something that has allowed you to kind of understand maybe the background of some of your athletes coming in who may not have come from premier programs, et cetera?
Yeah. I'm drawn to athletes that aren't maybe as haven't played as much club volleyball or just don't have maybe even the skill level, but are great athletes, because that to me is so much. That's what I love about coaching is developing them both as volleyball players and as people. But yeah, I love the raw athlete, and I'm drawn to that type of person. I think probably, partly because of my background. And, I was also a pretty high level swimmer. And so I had quite a background in a lot of different things that I had to learn about. And I love it. And about the 30 years at one place, I think that's an important topic. I think a lot of coaches are so anxious to move up the ladder that they don't necessarily prepare themselves as well as they could. Now, I don't know if I was ready for this, but I stuck it out through some really tough, challenging times. And the thing about staying at one school is it allowed me to do so many other things than just, to constantly move from place to place and reinventing the wheel. It allowed me to get actually really involved with, like our AVCA board of directors. And I was the president of our coaches association. And I've done a lot of stuff with USA Volleyball. And I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I was constantly kind of moving up. And so I know it's very unusual, but I think people maybe are even, again, starting to realize the value of kind of sticking around and the quality of life sometimes that brings as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, I know that you've got your book in the background, and I've got my copy here, and I'm working my way through it. But one of the things that is interesting about the title is it's talking about competing, but not winning. And a lot of athletes work very, very hard. A lot of coaches work very, very hard, but don't necessarily see the success of that. Can you tell me a little bit about why you decided to write a book in the first place?
Well, I started on a journey of looking at the business side of my program, because we moved into the Pac-12 10 or 11 years ago now. And about 7, and we experienced some success. We finished 9th first couple of years. And we had been a top 25 program and had been winning championships in some other conferences. But I was starting to feel overwhelmed with what needed to be done to win in the Pac-12. And I was on the road recruiting. I was spending a lot of time with my staff increased in size fairly significantly. And so I actually went to a world-renowned business strategist consultant who's a friend of the program, and asked him to look at my program and to give me ideas. And he was a friend of the program and friend of mine now. And it started me on a journey of really understanding that this is a very important aspect of coaching, is the business side of coaching, in that, you have to have a really functioning unit. When you're coaching, at least at the collegiate level, and to be honest, I think at any level, because this is a people business and business is a people business, and you're managing people. And my drive to figure out how to run my organization called Utah Volleyball more efficiently, for 2 reasons. 1, to win, and 2, for me to get back to coaching and doing what I love. So that's the key point, is I was spending more time managing than I was coaching, and spending time with my athletes and teaching life lessons and watching video and going through stats and all that kind of stuff that helps you win. So anyways, we started working together, and we did a few presentations at the AVCA convention. And start of COVID, he said, Beth, do you want to write a book? And I said, absolutely not. And he convinced me to, commit some hours each week, number of hours. And we had a lot of material, and it's just been a labor of love in terms of my passion for trying to help young coaches with this aspect of coaching. This is such a critical aspect of coaching that I think it's overlooked. And so I think it's a good niche for me to give back to the sport.
Yeah, and I think more than just the sport, I think it can help anybody who's in coaching. Looking at some of the contents of your book, one of the things that I was particularly interested in is aside from recruiting, which we'll get to in a minute, which is challenging in itself. Yes. It's when you've got these athletes in your program, not everybody is going to be the superstar. Not everybody's going to be the average player. Not everybody's going to be down near the bottom. How do you challenge those at the top to stay motivated and push when they're already, the star of the team, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
How do you bring up those average players to really pursue that level that the star can demonstrate? And then what do you do about the ones who are near the bottom who may be just happy being on the bench and don't really want to, push themselves? They don't have that intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic. In the book, we talk about them as stars and C performers.
Mm-hmm.
And stars only in that it's just a term. You always are going to have players with larger roles. And I suppose that's what we're talking about. But, you can't treat everybody the same on the court or in the pool or on the field, because different players have different roles. And so maybe your stars are going to touch, 70% of the balls for you when you get into matches. So I've never apologized for spending more time with them versus other people, although you have to take care of everybody's role. You have to develop everybody's role. It's important. But yeah, the stars have to be treated differently in that they just have to have different challenges. If they're always being challenged against everybody else on the team, then they're going to get bored. I think it's important that you constantly are, whether it's weighting scores, putting them in different situations, just making them figure things out differently is critically important for their motivation and for their development. And I think coaches spend too much time on the other side of, the bell curve from stars, and that's C performers. And, so C performer can be, and again, you could use this for players or staff, but, it could be based on experience level, it could be based on just purely talent, it could be based on motivation, could be based on external forces that are going on in their lives. Whatever it is, you either have to move them from a C performer or probably, find a way to have them move on, because we talk about in the book a lot, like the cost of a C performer is really high to a team. If you don't do something with that C performer, or like they're just happy to be on the team, like you said, then the team thinks that that's okay. That being unmotivated is okay. And then they'll regress to that, because they see that. Or it's blocking, maybe it's a really talented player, but they're unmotivated, but you still got them on the court. It's blocking someone else's opportunity. There's just a myriad of reasons why C performers aren't good for a team. And so, but as us coaches, right, we always want to help, players reach their full potential. And if they're not, then we look and try to figure out why they're not. That's our job as coaches, for sure. But at some point when you exhaust, all the things that maybe you can do and you see that they're not investing, then you have to look at, okay, what do you do for the best of the betterment of the team? And sometimes that's letting them go. And I've actually had a lot of conversations with a lot of coaches on this lately. Like, we're not in the social business. Like we're not a social service group. We're a team trying to achieve really high goals. And listen, learning lifelong lessons is second on my vision of my values of what's important. The number one is winning, because that's why we're here. And it's actually not winning. It's actually the pursuit of winning. Mm-hmm. And then, learning lifelong lessons through that pursuit is where you grow, right? When you put yourself in really uncomfortable positions, you make big goals, you're going to learn a ton. And that's really important to me. And so I invest in my athletes a lot. But yeah, it comes a time too where, maybe you need to part ways, and maybe that's going to be the best thing for them as well.
And I think it would be fair to say that the good coaches provide athletes with opportunities to address the issues. And so when it's time to cut that athlete, it's not a shock. It's not a surprise. They've been aware that what they've been doing is unacceptable.
Well, one of the biggest challenges in coaching is communication. Mm-hmm. I can communicate, I say ad nauseum. I mean, I feel like I'm communicating always, and probably it's 50% of what I need to do. It's one of the most challenging things, but yeah, I think, being direct and honest with players and where they're at and what they need to do. That's part of the process of their growth and their learning and getting better. And so you're right. At some point, it's not a surprise anymore.
Now, the other thing that I found really interesting in your book is looking at how you hire assistants, and also how you maybe don't always get the best assistants or the ones that you thought you were getting. And I think it's a challenge for all of us, whether, somebody like myself working in academia, I have to hire a faculty member. My hope is after the interview and after the resume and everything, we've got somebody great, but there's that potential that it's not going to work out, and things have to change. I think a lot of coaches struggle with this, not only just releasing players, but especially assistant coaches or people that you've personally hired, recognizing that maybe that's not the best for you or best for them. How do you go through that process to make sure that it's fair and again, it's in the best interest of everybody?
Yeah, the hiring and firing is one of the most difficult things we do.
Stressful.
It's stressful, and it's very similar to recruiting and then letting players go as well. So, one of the business tools, there's a couple of business tools that I did bring into the hiring process recently for my program, and it's been very successful. And we actually took we brought in 2 people for an assistant's job, and we put them through case studies, where we actually gave them real scenarios that were going on in our program, and we asked them to think their way through how they would handle it. And so, a lot of time, if you just ask the typical questions, you're going to get the typical answers.
Right.
But this was really intriguing to me. Actually, I asked 4 questions, and my associate head coach was with me, and it was like some we let them just answer on their own, and then some we made it be collaborative with us as a staff, and so we could see how we work together. But it was really interesting to see how they thought through a process. That's what I care about more is, how are they gonna, work their way through a problem and come to solutions. So that's been a great business tool that I've brought into, coaching through this partnership with my co-author. And then, I think just like with players, I think it's constant communication with an assistant coach of, meeting deadlines, doing the things that need to be done when you need them to be done, at the quality you need them to be done. And when they're not, then you need to have those conversations. And probably by the time you're talking about maybe letting them go, they're not surprised. One of the things that really helped me with communicating with my staff is it's a concept that we talk about in the book, is the difference between tasks and projects. Okay. And so, because a lot of times, I want them to be successful. So we have very defined job roles and what people's things are that they have to do, staff members. But things come up. And when I talk to one of my assistants, and I'm delegating, which is a big concept of this book as well, the importance of delegation. I talk to them about this is a task or a project. A task is something that just needs to be done and checked off, and just let me know it's finished. And a project is something that is more in depth, and I need to be more involved with, and it takes constant communication, and we need to move the dial. And at the end of the day, I'm going to make the decision. So there's so much interaction with staff, and so many times along the way, either a task didn't get finished or the project's not moving along. There's not good communication, and constant follow-up with your staff. That's where the meat of the working relationship is, right? The process of getting things done. And along the way, you have to be talking to them constantly, I needed this by this date. I didn't get it. What's going on? And then the reverse is true, where sometimes your assistants are so good and they spend so much time on something that you thought was a task, and then that's a problem. And so just being really clear with what the work is. And so kind of that process from hiring to firing, there's a lot that goes in between, right? Of working with them to, number one, mentor assistants. That's our job as head coaches. and help set them up for success for their next job. And then also just getting the, productivity that you need to try to win.
You've been in volleyball, you've been coaching collegiately, as you mentioned, for 3 decades, and sport has changed a lot over that time. Society's changed a lot over that time, and universities have changed a lot over that time. What would you say for you in today's environment is the most challenging task of being a collegiate head coach?
Yeah, just the engagement.
With the community, or?
No, with the team, within the team.
Okay.
The communication, I keep saying that word's coming up a lot today so far. I think keeping people keeping the whole program communicating, whether it's, about what needs to be done, whether it's about, like you said, tasks, whether it's, we've got a conflict and we've got to manage a conflict. So we got to communicate about that, whether it's leadership, understanding their role in engagement, their role as needing to communicate with the coaches. They need to communicate with the players. They need to have a good understanding of what the issues are. And so engagement in all aspects, and you call it communication or whatever, but that's, I think, the biggest challenge. We all know that, younger people today, and to be honest, probably myself as well, we're communicating a lot more digitally. And I'm often blown away when I ask if they have talked to someone. I know there's an issue that needs to be discussed. Yeah. Oh, did you talk to him in person? No, we Snapchatted or we text. And to be honest, I've gotten this issue. I've had this with assistants as well. Like I say, have you talked to someone? Yes. Did you talk to him in person? Well, we text. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, number one, for sure. The other one, honestly, is just getting players to buy into the greater good of the team and understanding that sacrifice is necessary. And
what about my stats, coach? My stats, right?
Yeah. And you can't have instant, it's not always instant gratification. And you want players to work through tough things and learn from them, but it's easier to complain or maybe even to transfer. So getting you can go to any recruiting tournament and stop in on any coaching conversation. And I guarantee collegiate coaches are talking about the players aren't willing to stick it out, and it's too easy to go in the transfer portal. It's too easy to complain, or it's too easy to post on social media. So keeping stuff, real within the family of your team and just communicating. It's very challenging these days. There's a lot of outside influences and forces that affect it more than before.
You mentioned recruiting briefly. Recruiting is such a challenge for collegiate coaches because everybody is after those high level, those star players, as you referred to. Yet at the same time, those players are often bombarded with opportunities. And I see, whether it be on social media or otherwise, players being offered multiple, places, almost like it's a competition to see how many scholarship offers I can get. How do you as a coach try to get that best player and make sure that they fit within your program? Because I think that's important too. Do you look within certain regions? Are you looking for a specific type of player? What do you do to get those players into your program as opposed to, a Stanford or somewhere else?
Yeah. You need to sell what you're about. You need to help. You need to have them understand, be very clear about what the values and expectations and, are of the program, and trying to find the right fit for whatever you're about with your program. And first of all, you have to be really clear about what you're about, so like you have to decide, are you going to be a program that is going to move players in and out and use the transfer portal a bunch. Of course, now it's becoming, this year's going to blow everything up because of COVID with the transfer. Right. But are you going to be one of those programs? And if you are, that's fine. It's as long as, players understand that. Or are you going to be, you're going to base your ability to win on culture? Or are you going to base your ability to win of just getting purely the best talent? So just having players understand what your program is about, what your values are, I think is really important. But it's critically important that we're doing the work to find out if those players truly, truly reflect those values. And so, just a lot of background work. And that's even difficult because, a lot of club coaches or high school coaches really want their player to go to a really high level. And so you don't always, get not necessarily the truth, but they talk to you about their best qualities. So watching a ton. I'm not watching the court as much as I'm watching off the court when I'm recruiting. I'm watching their interaction with parents, coaches, friends. Try to ask them some open-ended question as well, not just direct where I'm going to get the answer I want. It's kind of a little bit of that case study idea concept a little bit. I've started using that. Our communication with recruits has been even better during COVID because we're all more available. So yeah, it's a challenging thing, but I think being authentic to who you are as a coach and how you run your program, and then trying to get players to meet that, and doesn't always work. Absolutely doesn't always work. But I've certainly said no to a number of high-level, talented, skilled players that I didn't think were going to fit the culture of our program. I've done it often. Recruiting coordinator, assistant coaches that are recruiting coordinator don't love that when they've done all the work and then you just don't feel right, like they're not going to be the fit. But it's hard to know, but you just got to do the work.
Got a question come through to you from Dr. Tim Rice, who was a former guest on the show. And he says, as you think about how it was when you started your career, do you think that players today don't take responsibility for their actions and quality of work without blaming others or making excuses compared to when you first started?
Yes, I do. I think it's a cultural systemic issue that needs to be addressed. And we talk about it all the time. We talk about it relentlessly, about ownership of it. And they learn it, they do learn that. It's a learned skill because they're not coming into it maybe with as much ability to be totally honest with the situation and understand the nuances of the situation. And so I think, helping them, figure out that the responsibility issue is critical. If someone needs to look a lot different as a person when they leave the program as when they came in, right? Like that's the goal of coaches too. Not, like we're trying to develop young people in so many ways. But yeah, I think it's a real issue that we're all trying to deal with.
Just in closing, then, if you think about when you first started coaching and what you've learned along the way, what advice would you pass on to somebody who's maybe an early career coach and doesn't maybe want to make the same mistakes that you might have made and wants to avoid those? Is there anything that you would advise them or you've learned along the way that they need to know?
Well, I think, a few things. I think just figuring out what they value and why they're in the profession. I think, you have to understand your why, right? In everything you do. And if you know what that is, then you're going to start this journey of that's going to have a lot of depth to it of understanding, what you want to do in this profession. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think it's as simple as just do the work. Don't try to move up the career ladder too fast. Spend time learning from as many people as you can. I had I did get to work under some great coaches, but even now I wish I would have been an assistant maybe even longer, because I don't get into other people's gyms as much. One of the reasons I love doing USA stuff is because I'm working with other really high level coaches that, you know, I can collaborate with. So yeah, doing the work and you know, go to the conventions, read books, listen to podcasts, watch the videos. I was just a guest speaker on something a couple days ago, but it was a little bit more of a interactive interaction with a bunch of group of coaches. And I wrote 3 things down that I was going to take away to use this fall. So just always understanding that you know, I'm still learning, you're always learning, and be excited and passionate and be progressive, you know, learn from others, but you've got to figure out your own path and you know, what that's about for yourself.
Well, if anybody is watching maybe in the future or listening to the podcast and has a question for you they weren't able to ask today, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh, I'm pretty open book, so they can reach out. You know, my Twitter account, I have they can DM me on that, or if they can find my email, that's fine too. But happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk coaching.
And for those of you listening to the podcast, that's at Coach Launiere, and you should be able to get hold of Beth that way. Well, Coach, thanks so much for watching. It's one of those days. Thanks so much for joining me and sharing a little bit of your insight. And of course, for those of you watching, just a reminder that each and every week we interview somebody and try to learn a little bit more about the coaching profession. But Coach, when you just in closing, when you look back at your career, one of the things that I like to ask is what keeps you motivated in the fact that you've been doing it for so long. You talked about always wanting to learn something new. I see sometimes coaches who, well, this is how I've always done it.
Yeah.
And why should I adapt to the athletes that I have here? They need to adapt to me. What keeps you going to the next year and the next year and the next year as a coach when, you know, you've already been so successful? One could argue that you don't need to.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake to think is that you don't have to change with the athletes. You absolutely do. You have to understand them. What motivates me, honestly, is I love taking a group of individuals at the beginning of the year and forming them into a team by the end of the year. And all that goes into that. It's the development of their skill. It's the development of leadership. It's the development of roles. It's the teaching of communication and conflict management, all these things that at some point everything starts clicking. And by, you know, the end of the season, you're this really high functioning team. And that's what it's about, right? It's not about being a group of individuals. It's truly about this concerted force just going against the opponent and having this great experience, loving going into the locker room after a big win, knowing that you've all done it together. It's nothing better than that. That's what it's about for me. And progressing as a person and as a coach and changing with the times and staying up with technology and staying up with new concepts and staying up with, you know, what young people, you know, are all about is part of coaching as well. So it's one of the best professions there is. And I'm so passionate about it for those reasons. I love it.
Yeah. And I can hear the animation in your voice when you start talking about it. It's fantastic. Yep. Well, that's all we have time for this week. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.